Wayne, hey, congratulations for Wolf Garden that it's actually now released for people to see.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's yeah, kind of an exciting time. Have the first film, my first film out there in the public domain. It's yeah, it's an interesting experience for sure.
Terrific. So we have to ask, and we always ask everybody, is where the original idea came from for Wolf Garden?
It was kind of born out of the whole lockdown situation, really. I mean, I had another film that I was supposed to be shooting just before everything sort of went a bit crazy back in 2020. So it was like we had to, put the brakes on that one. And then obviously being in lockdown for quite a period of time, I was looking at different ways to use the budget from that film to do something different, do it more one location, and just try and film around the situation with all the rules and restrictions there were. So yeah, I started coming up with this idea about one location horror film, and I've always wanted to do something more of a werewolf movie, but I was just trying to do something a bit different with it, something a bit more psychological, a bit more suspense than your sort of average creature feature, and yeah, it sort of just took on from there. And with with the time we did have in lockdown and continuous delays with things, it gave me time to sort of redraft it and sort of work through telling sort of a different story with a different spin.
I mean, to tell you the truth, it is a pretty much a one-man show practically. Very lim you had what, a very limited cast and a very limited crew on this project.
Yeah, no, it was yeah, it was always kind of intentional to sort of try and do it that way, as sort of sort of the mental breakdown of a character, and we see a lot of things through his eyes, and you know the the mentality of grief and suffering and what he goes through, and gradually coming to terms with what has to happen. But yeah, and the other cast we've got is we had a great cast. I was very happy with who we got for it. So it was it all kind of fell into place.
Tell us about the character William that is basically this forefront and central to this character. His I want to say, his mental breakdown, his mental visions, psychological disconnect in its own way.
Yeah, I think it's the idea was always to sort of show it in this sort of non-linear structure of sort of flashbacks, and how do you cope with it's not only the grieving process, but obviously the elements of horror that are in there of what he's got to do and how he's sort of discovering it. The audience kind of discovers that with him, and we have these sort of moments, these memories and flashbacks of a more perfect time, this idealized memory he's got, the woman he loves, and how the day-to-day things, how the small little moments are what we remember when we lose people we love. And that was a big part of it, sort of emphasizing that story, that romance, that tragic romance part of it. And is keeping that thing guessing about how much of what we see in the film is real or not, because everything we see, as I said, is kind of through William's eyes and his perspective. So it's that question of, is he crazy? Is any of this real? Are we is what's going on happening right now, or is it a flashback? Is it the present? So that it's kind of, the idea is always to keep you on your toes with that.
Now, the flashbacks is sprinkled on here and there throughout the entire film, which is basically, showing a certain relationship with Chantelle. But I find the use of your cinematography, your colors, in this film quite differently between the past and the present. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, that was always quite an intentional thing. The sort of the color schemes and sort of visual motifs we used throughout the film. It was very important to me to sort of establish the different visual styles, as in, obviously when we're looking at different scenes, there's certain things that are a bit more rose tinted and a bit more sort of got more of a glow to them, whereas the present is very bleak. And certainly when we see some of the scenes, it's very important to just establish that. And I think that I think with all horror films as well, the visual aesthetic is so important to the overall atmosphere of what we're seeing. And it was always the intention from day one, with myself. I mean, myself and the cinematographer. we spent a lot of time going through storyboards and working out a shot list and exactly how we wanted it to look, to give it more of a sort of a vintage sort of 70s or 80s sort of feel to it as well. And obviously just I think with it as well, with a low budget film, you want to give it that little bit of production value, something to suggest that more than the budget we actually had, but to just to give it something to make it just stand on its own 2 feet in the way you look at it.
Do you consider this more of a horror film or a psychological thriller then?
I think it's kind of a hybrid, I would say. In that it's sort of like, you call it an elevated genre, in that it's not what you'd expect from a standard horror. It is very much a suspense thriller, but you've got the horror elements in there, so it's very much a mixture of the two. And we tried, and this is, I think, as a debut filmmaker as well, it's always that thing about you want to try and do something a bit differently, because it obviously just not to just stand out, but try and tell something a bit unique, rather than just going down that route of having a guy in a rubber wolf suit running around kind of thing. And I mean, I think all these films, they've all got their merits and their ways of doing things, but I think we just wanted to try and do something a little bit different to come up with something hopefully people haven't seen, and just something a bit more unique.
Did the pandemic or the indie budget hinder you from, basically telling that backstory of the incident, or showing that backstory of the incident?
Well, it was one of those things. I mean, with that, there was going to be footage shot of stuff that happened from the past, and we had to work around it. I mean, to be honest, we were hit by things like COVID on set and stuff like that. There was all kinds of things that happened. So and it was a decision early on that if we were to shoot some extra stuff, we'd probably do that later on. But then as we looked at the footage and stuff, and I kind of, it got to the point where it became a judgment call, in that I kind of like the idea of keeping it very centered in the countryside and around the cottage. I kind of felt that if we'd shown sort of, like, the idea was to scenes from sort of London, the London carnage kind of thing that is hinted at. I kind of felt that if you went too much down that route, it would take you out of the plate. We were very much contained in this moment, in this place, and I kind of like keeping it very centered there and just hinting at this stuff that had happened. And it's like with anything, I think it can be quite an interesting way of telling a story as well, when you've got something and you never quite fully know what it is, and it lets people sort of make up their own mind about what it could have been.
Mm-hmm. Now, the cottage that you found for the setting itself, it is a character that goes along with William here. So was the cottage you seeked out, or was it just landed coincidentally for you folks?
Well, yeah, no, I mean, there was a lot of footwork in finding that, and the shed as well. To be honest, I mean, we completely lucked out with the shed we used. But with the cottage, I think it was always so important to have something that was quite visually striking, because it's such an important part of the narrative. And as I was saying, the visual storytelling part of it, the shed and the cottage are so important that they become, as you say, they're their own characters within the film. They become a bigger part of the world. And I think with the cottage as well. I mean, when I found it, I think it was actually an Airbnb rental. That's how I found it. You look at the pictures of it and you see the way it photographs, and it is just it's grandma's cottage from Red Riding Hood. It's got that really nice character, and also down to the fact as well. And this was the case as well when we were filming there. In the daytime, it's beautiful, it's picture perfect, it's it's romantic, and it's all this kind of thing. And then in the evening, it's quite a creepy, isolated place, and that was actually the vibe that the cottage had. It's kind of at night time, you think, oh, it's a bit more creepy if you were there on your own, as opposed to in the daytime when the birds are singing, the sun's shining. And and the shed as well. I mean, that was a place I literally found 5 days before we were filming, because we had another location drop out, and absolute, by the grace of God or whoever, it just it came through for us, and thank God it did, because it was it was such an important thing. And when I compare it to the place we almost used, I mean, it's a completely different movie, really.
Mm.
And these are the issues you have when you're doing things on a low budget, in that you kind of you have to, some points you have to sort of go with what you've got, and we were kind of going with what we've got, and then just because things fell through, it was last minute desperation. And I wouldn't wish that feeling on anyone, of having to try and find that much of an important location a few days before filming. I was like literally going from like barn to stable to all these places, splashing through the mud on a rainy day. And by chance I found the shed, and as I say, I can't believe my luck with how good it looks on the film.
With the indie feature film like this, when did you come to the decision that you were going to star in the film yourself, and when did you come to the decision that you were going to direct the film yourself?
Well, I mean, it was always, I'd always sort of written it. The idea was I was always going to act, because I was an actor first and foremost. And really, I mean, there was points when I was thinking to myself, maybe we'd get a director in, because there was a lot. I mean, there was I had to do more than director. I had to do quite a lot of different roles, which I would not recommend as being, it's not a fun experience having to do many different roles, and there's a lot of craziness attached to that. But again, it kind of fitted with the character, at least, that this guy's losing his mind, and I wasn't too far away from that myself with all the added burdens. But yeah, I mean, it did sort of get to a point with the film where it was a kind of a needs must situation, but also down to the fact I had a very clear idea of the vision for the film. I knew how I wanted it to look. I knew how I wanted it to feel. And with regards to getting the footage, we did do it. We literally we just managed to get the film in the can, kind of thing. But when it came to the post production, the editing, the color grade, and all this stuff, and the sound and music, it's such a personal project, and it was so specific in how I wanted it to come across, that it just felt right that I should direct it. And I think you learn sort of on the job. I mean, I've directed two short films and a couple of trailers as well, so you sort of gradually realize that maybe in future, with more budget and more of a system of doing things, that it's a very it's very possible to do it without the level of stress that was attached to this particular film. You kind of just know that there's just, as soon as you work out a system, and the preparation as well. I mean, that we were very well prepared when we actually did get round to filming, and that's the only reason why we got the film finished, because we did have so many notes and specific, just it all written down of how we wanted it to go. Yeah, there's lessons learned all the way through, and it's the first of many films, I hope.
Well, it sounds like you're definitely doing a whole lot more down the road in that director's chair.
Yeah, I mean, that was another good thing from lockdown. There was a lot of time to sit and actually write scripts. There was not a lot else going on, so I did sort of develop projects. And I think it's always the case of, I've got another horror script, I've got a sort of comedy drama script. So it really is, it's just kind of seeing what fits and what comes up next, and having that option, that sort of slate of projects where you can sort of hopefully not necessarily pick and choose yourself, but sort of see which one gets the attention, gets the finance first.
Most excellent. And I want to touch upon the werewolf itself. Um, why did you want to do the reveal, or was the reveal always the intention?
There was always an intention to have the creature there, because I think it's kind of like there's always a sort of a payoff. I mean, it's like that thing about, we're trying to go more down the sort of like alien route, in that you don't really see too much. It's all in shadows, and it's hinted at, and the sound design. I mean, the sound design was so important in this film, to the creature, and how we feel and respond to it. So, but yeah, having having the reveal, having something in there, I think you still have to have that. I mean, potentially we could have had more of it, but I think we probably just the right amount, and it was all it was all practical uh, effects as well with that, and we only ended up having three VFX shots in the film. Obviously, we got the transformation. I won't go into too much detail to spoil it for anyone, but the transformation scene, that is when we got the VFX supervisor to come in and sort of just give that a little bit something extra, just to sell it a bit more and to give it that that production value. But yeah, it was very much an exercise in trying to show something without showing something, and that's I think that's what we ended up doing, and I'm quite proud of that.
And I think that's I just love creature features type of stuff too. So, but before I let you go, I want to hear from a first time director like yourself, is practical or versus VFX effects, the debate between those. If you did have the budget, would you still do it as a practical, or you would actually go full VFX?
Well, I think, I mean, that they've both got their merits in different ways, to be honest. And I think it's kind of that thing about when you compare certain movies. I mean, I grew up with the sort of the 80s era of horror, when everything was very practical and it was gross. I mean, it wasn't always realistic, but it was kind of like you saw something and it was kind of nasty and it was kind of real and it was part of that scene you're watching. You see it. And I think the thing that can be lost, and I think it's caught up a lot now, but there was certainly more of a period of time with the VFX. It's just so obviously not in the same room. It's that thing about it doesn't quite give you that same connect. And I think that there was articles written about this as well, and that the audience, you don't feel that level of danger necessarily when your sort of brain is sort of clicking in and telling you there's that it is visual effects. And it's I would say myself, it's kind of an amalgamation of the two. It's where you can use the VFX to further enhance the practical effects. I wouldn't go completely down, even for a character or something. I wouldn't want to necessarily go completely down the VFX route unless I mean, obviously there's plenty of examples. Gollum in Lord of the Rings is pretty much perfect, but as I said, it's just that thing about having those. Well, you think about the orcs. I guess you could compare the orcs in Lord of the Rings to the Hobbit. The ones in the original trilogy were very sort of real and present, and then in the Hobbit they were more CGI. And I would say I'm definitely more of a fan of the orcs in the original ones. But as I said, it's all got its merits, and I think if you can marry the two together to come up with the best possible outcome, it's whatever works, really.
Well said. Well said. Well, thank you very much, Wayne, for carrying this conversation with us. Congratulations once again with Wolf Garden, which is now available out in the world to see.
It's out in the world. Yeah, it's exciting but scary as well. So it's kind of out in the public domain for the first time. So yeah, here's hoping people enjoy it.
Terrific. Well, thank you very much, Wayne, and hopefully we get to do this again. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.